The sheriff found her in my hydrangea bushes at 2:15 a.m., clipboard clutched in one hand, night vision goggles strapped on, whispering HOA bylaws like she was summoning the ghost of neighborhood peace. Meanwhile, I stood there in my bathrobe, lever-action rifle in one hand, steaming mug of decaf in the other, wondering if this was how suburban wars really started. Yeah, that happened. She'd called the cops on me twice that week, but this time, I beat her to it. And watching her try to explain to law enforcement why she'd scaled my fence in tactical Crocs was honestly the most entertainment I'd had since my wife passed. My name's Wesley Tilden. Folks call me Wes. I'm 49, a widower, former Air Force logistics tech, trying to rebuild my life in a place called Cypress Hollow, which is the kind of planned community with so many cul-de-sacs even Google Maps gives up halfway through. I thought this would be quiet, peaceful, maybe a good spot to find a little bit of peace. After cancer took my wife 3 years ago, bought a modest 2-story colonial at the end of Magnolia Court, nice and tucked away, not so close to the main road, but just close enough that I could walk over for poker night with the other vets. I kept to myself, put in blackout curtains, old habits die hard, grew tomatoes out back, tried to mind my business. Honestly, my wild side was grilling pork chops at 11 p.m. with classic rock in my earbuds, making sure not to bother anybody. You know, I really thought I'd found my sanctuary. But if you've ever lived under an HOA, you know there's always that one person, the self-appointed warden of community standards. Ours was Jeanette Carlson. Jeanette ran the HOA like she was holding onto the last shred of power from her years as a middle school vice principal, clipboard, Fitbit, perfectly white colonial 4 houses down, and a yard so trimmed you could eat off it. Her favorite hobby? Enforcement. And our Cold War started the day I politely told her she wasn't allowed in my backyard for a routine inspection. She'd shown up, righteous as could be, demanding entry, voice just on the edge of shrill. I stood my ground. No notice, no entry. The way she gripped that clipboard, you'd think it was a weapon. I did this twitchy thing I'll never forget. She called it gross obstruction of protocol. I called it trespassing. Closed my gate in her face, nicely but still. 3 days later, I got slapped with $3,000 in fines. The violations? Man, they were almost impressive in their creativity. First, unapproved garden structure, which was a tomato cage from Home Depot. Second, aggressive ornamentation, which was a little garden gnome my late wife gave me as a joke, stuck behind some rose bushes, flipping the bird. To nobody in particular. Third, unauthorized avian congregation, because apparently, having 3 bird feeders made me the Pablo Escobar of sparrows. A rule, I'm sure, she invented on the spot. It kept coming. Official letters on HOA stationery, all smelling faintly of vanilla and rage. My mailbox. Too tall. Driveway. Unsightly oil stain I couldn't even see. Trash cans out for 37 minutes. Instead of the 30-minute window, she timed it. Literally. She'd stand outside with a stopwatch, peek over my fence with a tape measure. I started calling my motion lights Jeanette beacons because every time she walked by, they'd flare up like airport landing strips. She'd do it at exactly 7:15, 8:30, and 10:45, no matter the weather, no matter what. The only thing missing was a Soviet theme song in the background. People started noticing. Bob from 2 doors down caught her up on a stepladder with military-grade binoculars. Another neighbor swore she had a drone marked HOA Recon, but no one got video. Lady behind me said she saw Jeanette taking pictures of my yard with a telephoto lens the size of her forearm. It was funny, until she called animal control about a feral bobcat in my yard. That bobcat was my main man, General Meowster, a 23-pound tabby in a bow-tie collar who sunbathes on the deck like he owns the place. Animal control showed up, saw him, and just about busted a gut laughing. Jeanette? Not so much. So, next day, she called code enforcement about unregistered defensive infrastructure. Translation, my storm shelter, which came with the house and was perfectly legal. At this point, I'd had it. I put up security cameras. Nothing illegal, nothing hidden. Put little signs up. Smile, you're on camera. Small enough that you had to trespass to read them, which, naturally, she did. And when she scaled my 6-foot fence one night, clipboard, tactical vest, the works. I called the sheriff. Sheriff Drummond is a big guy, ex-Marine, built like a vending machine. He rolls up 10 minutes later, lights flashing. Finds Jeanette in my backyard, measuring the distance between my tomato plants and muttering about agricultural density. She tries to explain it away, implied consent, subdivision charter, waving her clipboard like it's the Declaration of Independence. Sheriff just looks at her, deadpan, and says, "Lady, that's not how laws or fences work. You can't climb someone's fence because you're on an HOA power trip." He charged her with trespassing and stalking. Once I handed over 3 months of harassment documentation, she was suspended on the spot. Turns out, the state attorney general had already started building a case on her. Complaints from half the homeowners on the block. My $3,000 in fines. Under review, which is lawyer speak for about to be shredded. The best part? The footage from my Ring doorbell caught her bellowing, "I am the law," at Sheriff Drummond, finger pointing like a cartoon villain, while wearing Crocs with HOA charms. That clip went viral overnight. Somebody auto-tuned it and made a TikTok remix called "I Am the Lawn." Next thing you know, kids are blasting it. At the grocery store, it all unraveled fast. Turns out she'd been pocketing fine money for years, buying herself high-tech gear and running background checks on new residents. Forensic accountant said nearly $40,000 embezzled, spent on everything from surveillance cameras to private investigation sites. HOA elections came up while she was under house arrest. She tried to run anyway, sent out campaign flyers that made it worse. Lost by a landslide. Even her husband voted against her. We threw a block party, the Mulch Mutiny. Someone ordered a cake from that fancy bakery. Big, no trespassing, and buttercream across the top. Mariachi band. Mrs. Henderson did a victory dance that went viral too. Local news called it the sweetest revenge in suburban history. Jeanette had to sell her house to pay the legal bills, banned for life from any HOA, 3 years probation, 6 months in jail, and had to pay back all the fraudulent fines with interest. Over $60,000. When the judge read her sentence, she fainted in court, dead serious. Now, every time I see a pair of Crocs or hear a leaf blower, I can't help but smile. But you tell me, where's the line between protecting a neighborhood and letting one person become a tyrant? What would you have done if you were me? Drop your wildest HOA nightmare in the comments. Let's hear about it. And if you think justice was served or not, tell me why. Because I'm still not sure if I'm the hero or just the last guy standing with a tomato cage and a stubborn old cat. Let me tell you, just when I thought the whole saga was behind me, Cypress Hollow found a way to surprise me again. The dust had barely settled from Jeanette's spectacular downfall, but the HOA board was left in chaos. 3 seats empty. Everyone pointing fingers, nobody willing to step up. For a minute there, the neighborhood actually felt free, almost like the suburbs I remembered as a kid, kids riding bikes till dark. Folks leaving garage doors open without worrying about tape measures or drones overhead. But if you know anything about human nature, you know a power vacuum never stays empty for long. About 2 weeks after our victory block party, a new face started showing up at every board meeting, Eric Landers. He looked harmless enough, mid-30s, always with a pressed shirt, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of guy who volunteers to organize the library's used book sale. He introduced himself as a concerned citizen, but in reality, Eric was Jeanette's spiritual successor, just in khakis instead of Crocs. At first, nobody really noticed him. He was polite, soft-spoken, never raised his voice, just asked questions. But the questions got weirder. How many lumens should porch lights emit? What's the decibel limit on wind chimes? Should we consider background checks for all dog walkers? You get the idea. The new board, desperate to look responsible. Listen to him. I should have seen it coming. One night, I came home late from a VFW dinner and found a little printed note taped to my door. "We noticed your tomato cages don't match the HOA approved color palette. Please correct by Friday." Friday, like I was running a tomato cartel. Old Bob from 2 doors down stopped by, shaking his head, holding his own violation slip for a flag display. Infraction, because his American flag was 3 inches off center on the pole. We stood there, 2 grown men in our pajamas, trading stories about the glory days, before grown adults measured trash. Can distances like Olympic judges. But the twist, and you knew there'd be one, Came with the security system I'd put in after Jeanette. I checked the motion alerts that night and caught something. Wild on the footage, a different car, a midnight visitor in a hoodie, moving from house to house. At first, I thought it was just some teenager pulling pranks, but then I saw Eric, clipboard, flashlight, quietly inspecting everyone's front porch. He even tried to adjust Bob's flag, probably thinking nobody was watching. The next day, more violation slips showed up all down the street. That's when I decided enough was enough. I printed out some stills from my security cameras and called for an emergency HOA meeting. Not just the board, but every homeowner. I figured if they could, all see what was happening in plain sight. Maybe folks would finally stop rolling over. We packed the rec center that Thursday, standing room only. Eric tried to talk his way out, said he was just performing a courtesy check for community beautification. You could feel the tension crackling in that room. People murmuring, glancing at each other, realizing maybe we'd replaced one dictator with a sneaky new one. Then, Mrs. Henderson, yes, the same lady who danced her way into internet fame, stood up and called it for what it was. We didn't throw out the last busybody just to let another one take over. The room erupted. Neighbors who barely spoke to each other were suddenly swapping stories about late-night inspections, odd new rules, even Eric's efforts to get folks to sign proxy voting forms for their convenience. Someone suggested we rewrite the HOA charter entirely, set actual limits, and maybe, just maybe, trust people to handle their own tomato cages. In the end, we voted right there to suspend all new fines, put a freeze on rule changes, and launch a neighborhood committee made up of regular homeowners. No more single-person patrols. No more secret night missions. Eric didn't even try to fight it. He just gathered his clipboard, slunk out, and nobody's seen him since. So here's the thing. You can't keep people from trying to control what isn't theirs. But you can stand together and say enough is enough. Now, our block feels different. People wave again. Kids draw chalk dinosaurs on the sidewalk. There's still an HOA. Sure, but now it's run by a rotating committee. No more emperors, no more tactical crocs, just neighbors, arguments, and the occasional very ugly tomato cage. Let me ask you, have you ever seen your community fall into the same trap, trading one tyrant for another? What would you do if someone tried to sneak new rules under your nose? I want to hear your wildest power trip story. Drop it in the comments. Let's see whose neighborhood is the craziest. And hey, if you ever catch your HOA president in night vision goggles, do yourself a favor, start recording. You never know when you'll need it.